Long ago, the stars were full of life and power, and many alien races rose and fell. But there was one race that shook the galaxy in ways none could ever forget, and that race was humanity. For a time, they spread like fire across the void, building ships of steel and cities of light, and their voices carried from one corner of the galaxy to another. Some feared them while others loved them, but all respected them because humans were strange and bold and never gave up, even when defeat was certain. Yet, the galaxy believed that one day humanity was gone forever, erased by wars and disasters so great that not even a whisper was left behind. Alien records were scrubbed clean, their maps marked Earth as dead, their libraries erased the very word human. It was as if they never existed at all, and for ages the stars were silent of them. Rulers told their children that humanity had been a mistake, a violent branch of life that destroyed itself, and no one questioned it, for no one expected to ever hear from humans again. Yet across the endless dark of space came a sound so faint that most thought it was a dream, a broken call, a whisper of desperation. It carried through the void like an echo of something long buried. And those who listened closer felt their hearts tremble, for the signal was not random. It was not static. It was a message, a voice of a world believed long dead. The voice came from Earth. The galaxy froze in silence. Mighty empires and arrogant lords stopped their endless quarrels and turned their ears to the echo. Ships halted, fleets held their fire, and all listened to the fragile sound. Many laughed at first, saying it must be a trick or an old machine that somehow still worked. Others whispered in fear that ghosts had awakened, but a few remembered stories told by their ancestors, stories of human defiance, stories of wars where humans fought even when all odds crushed them, stories of a race that never truly accepted defeat. And those few felt a shiver, for they knew that if the signal was real, then humanity had not been erased at all. On the World Council of the Great Alliance, the leaders argued with voices sharp and fearful. One elder slammed his hand upon the table and cried that the humans must not be allowed to return. He told tales of soldiers who fought with broken weapons and still stood tall against fleets of war. Another laughed and said the humans were gone forever, and that this was nothing but a fading echo of a dead world. But beneath the laughter there was unease, because deep in their bones they all remembered the one truth that haunted them: the humans never died easy. While the council fought with words across the stars, ordinary beings whispered to each other in fear and wonder. Was it true? Had the ghosts of Earth spoken? In the outer colonies, workers gathered around broken radios and listened to the faint hum. Miners in the dark belts stopped their drills and felt chills run down their spines. Soldiers guarding borders felt their hands shake. Merchants whispered in markets. Children asked their elders about the lost race. And slowly a wave of fear and awe spread through the galaxy. And far away on the quiet blue planet that had been abandoned and marked as lost, something stirred. Earth was scarred and broken. The skies held the ash of old wars. The cities were silent ruins, and nature had reclaimed much of what once was. Yet deep beneath the surface, life endured, and it was human life. They had not all been destroyed. They had not all vanished. For in the deepest caves and hidden bunkers, survivors had clung to existence. They had passed stories from one generation to the next. They had taught their children never to forget who they were. They had built small fires in the shadows and sworn that one day those fires would become stars again. It was these hidden survivors who had sent the call. It was not an accident, not a machine left running, but a choice, a message sent with trembling hands and steady hearts. They wanted the galaxy to know. They wanted the galaxy to hear. They wanted all who had erased their name from history to learn the truth, that humanity was not extinct, that Earth was not silent, that the forgotten race still lived. The signal was weak and broken, but it carried a simple code. It said, "We are here." It said, "We survived." It said, "We will rise again." And though the words were few, the meaning was vast. Across the stars the message struck like thunder. It shook the mighty, and it gave hope to the weak. And though no one could yet see the faces of those who had sent it, the sound alone was enough to change the balance of the galaxy. Many empires wondered if they should silence the signal before it spread. Many warlords thought of sending fleets to burn whatever remained. Yet something held them back, a memory, a shadow, a fear that if they struck at humans they would awaken the very storm they dreaded. So they waited, and as they waited the galaxy buzzed with tension, fear mixed with wonder, hatred mixed with hope. And for the first time in ages, all eyes turned to one place, the small blue planet once called Earth. In the deep halls of the Alien Council debates grew louder. Some claimed humans were dangerous and must be destroyed at once. Others said the risk was too great and that perhaps humanity had learned peace in its silence. But no one truly believed that, for in every story ever told about humans, one lesson was always the same: that they fought, that they endured, that they stood even when broken, and that no one who faced them left unchanged. And so the council trembled with indecision while the people of the galaxy whispered in awe. Thus the first chapter of the forgotten race began anew. A single signal, a single whisper from the ruins of a world thought dead, had shattered centuries of lies, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the ghosts of Earth would rise as flesh and blood once more. And in that silence, in that fearful waiting, the truth became clear. Humanity had never been erased, only hidden. And the question that now echoed in every heart was not if they had returned, but what they would do next. Across the endless stars, the great council of the galaxy gathered inside a hall so vast that entire ships could rest within its walls. The chamber was carved from silver stone and filled with glowing light that shifted like living fire. Banners of many empires hung from the ceiling, and voices echoed in every corner. This was the place where rulers and elders came together when matters threatened all of them. And now the matter was the signal from Earth, a sound they had not expected to ever hear again. The council began with silence, heavy and thick, as if the air itself was afraid to move. And then one elder from the Serati people rose, his body tall and thin with skin that shimmered like glass. His voice rang sharp as he declared that humanity was a danger to all. He reminded the chamber of old battles where human fleets fought until their last breath, of wars where human soldiers fought with fire, even when their cities burned to ash. He shouted that the galaxy had once bled because of humans, and that to allow them to rise again was to invite ruin. His words cut through the silence, and many nodded in fear. Yet from the opposite side, a counselor from the Irune, a race of soft-skinned thinkers with long memories, raised her hands and spoke with calm strength. She said that erasing humans from history had been a mistake, that lies could not bury truth forever, and that perhaps humanity deserved to return and be part of the galaxy again. She reminded them that not all humans were warriors, that some were builders, dreamers, and explorers. She told of how humans brought fire to cold worlds and laughter to places where only silence had lived. Her words softened the hearts of some who listened, but others hissed in anger. Arguments erupted like storms. Voices clashed against voices. Fear battled hope, and the chamber shook with sound. Some shouted to send fleets at once and burn Earth to the ground before humans could grow again. Others cried that such a strike would awaken the very storm they feared. Many remembered the old saying whispered in the shadows of history, that to fight a human was to face an enemy who never stopped even when broken, an enemy who would find victory even in defeat. While the council roared with division, far away in the markets and streets of countless worlds the common people whispered. Traders carried the rumor from one port to another. Soldiers told stories in secret barracks. Children listened with wide eyes as their elders spoke of the lost race. Some were afraid, believing the return of humans would bring war. Others were curious, hoping to see the strange beings their ancestors once met. And some even felt joy, believing that humanity's return meant change, for in many corners of the galaxy people lived under cruel rulers who feared the spark of freedom. And to them the idea of humans rising again was like a light in the dark. Back in the council chamber, the leader of the Veyrak Empire spoke, his body covered in scales that shone like blades, his voice deep and heavy as thunder. He reminded them all of the war called the Burning Years, when Veyrak fleets outnumbered human fleets 10-1, and still the humans stood and fought until entire systems burned. He said he had read the old reports and seen the terror in his people's eyes. And though he had no love for humans, he admitted that they were not like others, that They carried a fire no force could erase. He warned that if even a fraction of that fire remained, then the galaxy faced a storm that no fleet could stop. The council chamber fell silent at his words. Even those who hated humans most felt the weight of his warning. For the Varak were not known for fear, yet here was one of their lords speaking of it openly. And so the room shifted into a heavy pause, the kind of pause that carried more power than words. Then came the youngest voice, a small representative from a world with little power, her skin pale like the moon, her body fragile compared to the giants around her. Yet her voice carried with clear courage. She said that to erase humanity once had been an act of cowardice, that to hide their name in shame had been a crime, and that the galaxy must face the truth. She asked what kind of rulers they were if they feared one broken world. She asked if their power was so weak that the whisper of humans could shake them. Her words struck hard and left many silent. Still, the council could not agree, and in their failure a new plan was born. They would not yet strike, they would not yet welcome. Instead, they would send scouts to Earth, secret and silent, to see with their own eyes if the signal was true, to discover if humans still walked their broken planet, and to measure what danger might rise. This plan was met with grudging agreement, for it delayed action while feeding their hunger for truth. So it was decided, fleets disguised as explorers would be sent to the blue planet once erased from their maps. They would search the ruins, study the survivors if any existed, and bring back proof to the council. And in this choice the galaxy turned to a new path, for once again eyes that had long forgotten Earth now gazed toward it. Yet even as the council made its choice, shadows of fear lingered. Whispers grew that the decision came too late, that the signal had already awakened something beyond their control. From the stars far from the chamber, strange stirrings began. Allies of old humans who had once fought beside them in secret now stirred from hiding. Old codes long buried were spoken again, and in the hearts of the weak a spark lit. The spark of hope that perhaps the humans would return to break the chains of the mighty. The council closed its meeting with words of order, but in truth no order remained. Each ruler left with fear in their heart. Each elder carried visions of human faces rising from the dust, and each voice carried the same unspoken thought, that if the forgotten race had indeed survived, then the galaxy would soon face trials greater than any it had known. And so as the lights dimmed and the chamber emptied, the echo of Earth's signal still rang in every ear, soft and broken, yet filled with promise. And the galaxy waited trembling for what was to come. Far below the surface of Earth, in dark tunnels and ancient shelters where light was weak and air was heavy, there lived the last children of humanity. They were the ones who had refused to die, the ones who clung to life. Even when the world above turned into fire and ruin, they were not many and their homes were broken, but in their hearts they carried a strength that no enemy could take away. Generations had passed since the great wars, and the surface of Earth was scarred beyond recognition. The cities of glass and steel were now only towers of ash. Broken bridges lay across rivers like skeletons of a forgotten time. The sky was gray with dust, and the soil was bitter. Yet beneath all this ruin, the survivors had built hidden places where life continued in secret. They grew food in underground gardens using lamps made from scraps. They gathered rainwater in deep wells. They hunted in silence across the wild surface, and always they returned to the safety of the caves. The elders told stories each night, stories of the old world where humans had walked proudly among the stars. They spoke of ships that crossed the void like arrows of fire, of voices that carried across endless space, of songs that echoed in the hearts of alien friends and alien foes. They spoke of the day when that light was crushed, when the galaxy turned against them, when lies spread, the humans were gone forever. But the elders always ended their stories with the same promise: the humans were not finished, that as long as one child lived, the fire of Earth still burned. Children grew with wide eyes. Listening to these stories, they dreamed of stars they had never seen. They painted pictures of ships they had never touched. They whispered promises to each other that one day they would rise again, and their voices would be heard across the galaxy. Their hands shook with hunger, and their bodies were weak, but their will was like stone unbroken. In these hidden places there was a leader not chosen by crown or council, but by respect his name was Kale. He was a man with scarred arms and eyes that burned like flame, though his hair was gray and his back bent from years of labor. None doubted his strength, for he carried the memory of every lost soul on his shoulders. Kale was the one who decided to send the signal. He was the one who told his people that silence must end, that the galaxy must know that humanity still lived. The machine they used was old, built from pieces of technology long forgotten, patched with wires scavenged from ruins, powered by generators that shook with every breath. It was fragile like glass ready to break. Yet worked. Kale and his engineers worked night after night, repairing circuits, soldering metal, whispering prayers over each spark, until at last the signal carried once more into the stars. When the people gathered to hear the machine hum, their hearts shook with both fear and hope. They knew that this call could bring danger, that enemies could return to finish what they had started, but they also knew that silence was death, and that their children deserved more than hidden caves. Kale spoke to them, his voice low but steady. He said, "We are the last, but we will not be forgotten. We will rise. Even if we are broken, we will speak, even if our voices are weak. The galaxy will know that Earth is alive." The signal was simple, not a long speech, not a demand, only a code carried through static. It said, "We are here." It said, "We are alive." It said, "We will not fade." And though it was weak, its meaning was fire. The people listened with tears in their eyes. Some reached out and touched the machine as if it were holy. Others whispered to their children, "Remember this night. Remember that we did not hide forever." After the signal was sent, silence filled the chamber. But it was not the silence of fear, it was the silence of pride, for they knew that in that moment the weight of lies was broken, that somewhere far above the stars were listening, and that someone somewhere would hear. Still danger lurked. Kale knew that the galaxy might answer not with welcome, but with war. He knew that old enemies might still hold hate in their hearts, but he also knew that humanity had never survived by hiding forever. They had survived by fighting, by enduring, by refusing to vanish, even when the night was darkest. On the surface of Earth, hunters returned from a wild, carrying meat wrapped in cloth. They spoke of strange lights in the sky. They said they saw shadows moving above the clouds, as if ships were already watching. Kale listened and felt the heavy truth that the galaxy had indeed heard, and that time was short. Yet he did not tremble. Instead, he called his people together and told them that no matter what came, they would face it as humans, not as ghosts. Children gathered around fires and sang songs of hope, their voices thin, yet sharp like blades echoing through stone corridors. Elders whispered prayers to ancestors, thanking them for keeping the fire alive, and warriors sharpened their weapons, though they knew that steel and arrows were small against ships of the stars. Still, they prepared, for they were human, and humans always prepared. As the night stretched long, Kale walked alone through the ruins. Above, the wind howled across empty streets. Grass grew through cracks in stone, and the bones of towers reached into the gray sky. He looked upon the broken world and whispered to himself, "We are still here." And as he spoke, he felt that somewhere far beyond the stars, others were hearing those same words, whispered in fear, whispered in awe, whispered in anger. Thus the hidden survivors stood at the edge of history, no longer silent, no longer erased. Their message carried across the galaxy like a spark seeking kindling. And though they were few, and though they were weak, the fire in their hearts was stronger than any fleet, stronger than any lie, and stronger than any silence. The galaxy believed humanity gone, but Earth had spoken, and the story of the hidden survivors had only begun. High above the wounded skies of Earth, alien ships moved like shadows in the clouds, their shapes sleek and sharp, their lights hidden from sight. They came not with banners of peace, nor with drums of war, but with the silence of hunters who wished not to be seen. Their engines whispered across the void, and their eyes searched the ruined world below for the ghosts they thought could never exist. The scouts were chosen from many races, their task clear and heavy: to confirm if humanity lived, or to prove that the signal was nothing more than the echo of a dead world. Their commanders told them to move with caution, for though the council spoke of curiosity, many hearts feared that the humans might indeed be alive and ready to rise again. The scouts whispered to each other in their quiet chambers, asking if the stories were true, if humans were truly the monsters and miracles the old tales spoke of. The first ship lowered through the thick clouds. The sky burned orange with the glow of the sun behind dust, In ash the ruins of cities spread like skeletons across the land towers, shattered bridges, broken roads swallowed by vines and trees, once mighty centers of human life, now husks of stone and iron. The scouts looked upon the world and felt both pity and fear, for here was the grave of a race that once stood proud, and here perhaps was the cradle of their return. Their boots touched the soil, and the ground groaned, as if it remembered the weight of human footsteps. One scout bent and lifted a shard of metal twisted by heat, yet bearing faint marks of human craft. He whispered that these ruins were not of beasts or savages, but of builders and dreamers. And the others nodded, though fear stirred in their hearts, for they knew that if builders remained, then fighters remained as well. Moving through the ruins, they found walls painted with colors faded by time, symbols carved into stone, songs of a people who once lived and laughed. One scout touched a cracked wall where a child's handprint had been pressed into paint, and those centuries had passed, the marks still spoke of warmth and love. And the scout felt uneasy, for this was not the legacy of monsters, this was the legacy of people. As the scouts walked deeper into the ruins, the air grew heavy and the shadows deep. Then, without warning, they heard movement, faint footsteps echoing between broken towers. Hearts raced, weapons lifted, and breaths held. They followed the sound through rubble and dust until at last they saw them, the humans. The figures stepped from the shadows, wrapped in cloth and armor made of scavenged steel, their bodies lean and scarred, their eyes burning with fire. Though their numbers were few and their weapons simple, they stood tall and unyielding. One of the scouts whispered in disbelief, "They are alive, the humans are alive." The humans did not run, they did not hide. Instead, they looked straight into the eyes of the aliens with defiance and pride. One stepped forward, tall and strong, with hair tied back and scars across his face. He carried no great weapon, only a spear tipped with sharpened stone, yet his stance spoke louder than fleets. His voice carried through the broken air, "You have come to see if we still breathe, and now you see the truth. We live, we endure, we are human." The scouts trembled, some reached for weapons, yet none dared strike, for the fire in the human eyes froze them. Where they stood, these were not ghosts, these were not weaklings hiding in caves, these were survivors hardened by centuries of pain and loss, yet still standing, still daring to speak to those who once erased them from history. The leader of the scouts stepped forward, his voice cautious and heavy. He asked, "Why send the signal? Why call the galaxy that once turned against you?" And the human answered with words like thunder, "Because silence is death, because our children deserve more than shadows, because you tried to erase us, and we will not be erased again." The ruins around them seemed to echo with the words, as if the very stones remembered and agreed. The scouts felt the weight of history pressing upon them. They realized that the council would not find broken creatures easy to crush, but a people ready to rise again. One scout whispered to another, "If they are this strong after centuries in ruin, what will they be if they rise to the stars again?" The humans watched the scouts with steady eyes, their hands ready, their bodies tense. They knew that these visitors carried judgment, that their presence meant danger, yet they did not falter. They wanted the galaxy to know that humanity was not dust. They wanted the stars to hear their voices through the mouths of their enemies. Night fell over the ruins, fires burned in human camps, their smoke rising into the sky. The scouts sat in silence, watching and listening. They heard laughter around the fires. They saw children chasing each other through broken streets. They witnessed men and women sharing food and songs. Even in ruin, the humans carried joy and courage, and the scouts felt confusion, for how could such people be feared? How could such warmth be erased? Yet, deep in their hearts, they understood why the galaxy feared them, for a people who could endure such ruin and still laugh could never be crushed forever. A people who could live in shadows and still dream of stars could never be erased. One scout whispered, "They are not weak, they are waiting." As dawn broke, the leader of the scouts made his choice. They would return to the council with the truth. They would speak not of ghosts, but of survivors, not of extinction, but of endurance. They would tell the galaxy that Earth was alive, the humans still lived, and their fire had not gone out. The humans watched as the ships rose into the sky, their eyes following the shadows until they vanished into the clouds. Kale, the leader of the survivors, stood among his people, his face carved with lines of age, but his voice steady. He said, "They have seen us, they will tell the stars, and soon the stars will decide if they come with war or with peace. But no matter what comes, we will stand." And in that moment, as the fires of dawn touched the broken towers of Earth. It was clear that the age of silence was over. The humans had been found, the first contact was made, and the galaxy would never be the same again. When the scouts returned to the council, their ships carried no weapons of war, no trophies of conquest, only the truth, and the truth was heavier than any blade. They spoke of ruins, yes, but also of fire. They spoke of scars, yes, but also of, well, they told of humans who still lived, who still stood, who still spoke with defiance in their eyes. The council chamber fell into silence, so sharp it felt like the air itself would crack. And then came the voices of fear. The first to speak was Lord Varak, his scales gleaming in the light, his memory heavy with tales of human war. He said that the council had made a mistake in waiting. He said that the humans must be destroyed now, before their numbers grew, before their fire spread again. His words carried the echo of old terror, for he had read records of fleets that should have crushed the humans, yet found themselves burned in the end. Others rose to support him, their voices sharp like blades. They said the galaxy had paid once in blood because of human defiance. They said the fire of Earth had nearly torn empires apart. They cried that to allow humans to rise again was to invite the same storm that once left stars in ashes. Yet there were those who shook their heads, counselors who had seen the scouts trembling when they spoke of human eyes. They said that striking now would not bring safety, but chaos. They said that even a broken people could strike back harder than expected. They said that fear of humans was proof enough that they should not be underestimated again. In the markets of far worlds, whispers grew faster than traders could count credits. Miners spoke in dark tunnels, saying the humans were alive. Farmers in the green fields of distant moons told each other that maybe the humans would bring change. Slaves under the chains of cruel masters whispered hope that the humans would rise against their oppressors. Fear and hope mixed across the stars, until every corner of the galaxy seemed to tremble. Kale and his people did not yet know of this storm above their heads. They only knew that the sky had once again carried shadows of ships. They prepared for what would come. They gathered in the deep halls, sharpening weapons of stone and steel, training their young, teaching them to strike fast and move silent. Kale told them that the galaxy had seen them, and now the galaxy would choose, but whatever choice was made, humans must stand. In the council chambers, the fear took new form. For some demanded immediate war, fleets launched at once to wipe Earth clean. Others demanded containment, sealing the world and watching it forever. Others demanded peace, but few truly believed it. In every word, one truth echoed. The galaxy was afraid. Memories of human wars filled the minds of rulers. The burning years, the long sieges, the silent front, where humans fought with nothing but cunning and still won victories greater than armies. It was not the numbers of humans that brought fear, it was their will. For the galaxy remembered how, even in defeat, they had struck back, how they had turned ruin into strength and silence into weapons. A voice rose from a small world's counselor. She asked what kind of galaxy feared a broken people. She asked what kind of leaders trembled at the sight of survivors. Her words rang brave, but her eyes betrayed worry. For she too knew that fear had reason, and that the fire of humans was not like the fire of others. It did not fade, it did not weaken, it grew stronger in darkness. Meanwhile, in the deep caves of Earth, children asked Kale if the visitors would return with peace or with war. Kale looked into their young eyes and told them only the truth. He said, "They will come, and when they do, we will stand." He said, "Humanity has always stood, even when the ground shook beneath them." He said that the galaxy may fear us, but we will not fear them. As the nights passed, strange signals moved through space, hidden messages from old allies of humanity, races that had once stood beside them in forgotten wars. Some were small and broken themselves, yet when they heard the signal from Earth, they stirred again. Old codes, long buried, whispered through the void, as if the return of humans had awakened more than just fear, as if it had awakened the memory of hope. Back in the council chamber, divisions, deepened threats were spoken behind curtains. Plots formed in secret halls. Some planned to betray others if it meant striking humans. First, some sought to use humans as tools against rivals. Some prayed that silence would return, but silence was gone forever. The return of fear was not only in the council, but in the homes of the mighty emperors who dreamed uneasy dreams of human fleets in their skies. In the halls of generals who woke in the night with the sound of human voices in their ears. In the hearts of rulers who looked at their armies and wondered if even they were enough to stand against the forgotten race. And still the humans, prepared though their weapons were small, though their walls were weak, though their numbers were few, their fire was bright. Kale stood among his people in the ruins of an old city and said, "We are the last line, we are the proof that we cannot be erased." He raised a simple blade forged from broken steel and held it to the sky. His people raised their voices, and the ruins shook with their cry. The galaxy waited armies, sharpened blades, fleets, fueled engine, spies, carried lies and truths alike. Yet beneath all the fear, one fact burned stronger than all the rest. Humanity was alive. Earth had spoken. The fire of the forgotten race was no longer hidden, and the galaxy trembled, not knowing if the return of fear would end in ruin or in rebirth. The Council of the Galaxy believed that humanity could be contained, that their fire could be smothered before it spread again. But they were wrong, for the fire was already moving. It was already finding air and fuel in places the Council had long ignored. In hidden corners of space, whispers grew into voices, and voices into actions. Old allies remembered debts, new rebels saw hope, and even broken worlds lifted their heads when they heard the call from Earth. Kale and his people did not wait in silence. They gathered what little they had and shaped it into something more. Scraps of old machines became weapons, fragments of shattered satellites became shields, broken engines were reforged into crude ships that could rise once again into the sky. These ships were not beautiful, they were not strong, but they were human, and that alone made them dangerous, for every piece of metal, every wire, every bolt carried the spirit of survival and defiance. When the first ship rose from Earth's surface, the people watched with eyes filled with tears and fire. It shook in the air, its engines roared like beasts, and yet it flew into the dark sky, carrying with it not only men and women, but also the weight of centuries of silence. The stars that had been denied to them for so long now lay open once more, and the humans reached toward them, not as ghosts, not as shadows, but as a living race reborn. News of the rising ships spread fast across the galaxy, and fear turned sharper. Some empires prepared fleets to strike Earth before the humans could grow. Others debated in silence, waiting to see how strong this rebirth truly was. But then came the moment that would change everything, the moment when the humans proved that even in weakness, they could not be broken. A small colony world on the edge of the stars cried for help. Raiders from a warlord empire had descended upon it, burning homes and enslaving the weak. No one answered, for no one dared to challenge the raiders. They were too strong, too cruel, too ruthless. Yet when the call reached the ears of the humans, Kale gave no pause. He gathered his people and sent their crude ships across the dark to answer the cry. The raiders laughed when they saw the human ships. They mocked their size, their broken hulls, their weak engines. They believed this battle would be a slaughter, but they did not know the truth. They did not understand what it meant to fight humans. Kale's voice rang through the radios, telling his people to fight not for glory, not for conquest, but for freedom, for the right to live. And the humans roared in answer, their hearts burning hotter than their engines. The battle began with fire. The raiders unleashed weapons of power, but the human ships moved with wild fury, dodging, weaving, striking back with every scrap of strength they had. Each hit they took only fueled their anger. Each wound only sharpened their claws. Where one human ship fell, two more struck harder. Where a weapon failed a pilot, turned their own body into a spear, ramming into enemy ships with fearless rage. The galaxy watched through hidden eyes. Spies sent by rulers reported back with disbelief. The raiders were losing to a force they should have crushed. The humans fought with such madness, such fire, that even the strongest raider ships cracked under the storm. When the dust settled, the humans had won. The colony was free. The raiders fled into the dark, and the survivors cried out in joy, calling the humans saviors, calling them legends reborn. The news spread faster than fire across dry fields. The humans had fought again, and they had won. The council tried to hide the truth, but truth is a flame that cannot be buried. Worlds whispered to each other that the forgotten race was back, not as victims, not as relics, but as warriors who could still stand. The fear of rulers grew, but so too did the hope of the oppressed everywhere. On Earth, Kale stood before his people, his body weary, but his eyes alight. He said, "Today, we proved them wrong. They thought we were dust. They thought we were gone. But we showed them that the fire of humanity is eternal." He raised his hand, and the people roared, their voices echoing through the broken ruins, until even the stones seemed to tremble. Across the galaxy, other races who had once hidden in fear began to move. Secret messages reached Earth, offers of alliance, offers of aid. Ships carrying supplies slipped through the shadows to find the humans, for they knew that the return of humanity meant the return of resistance against the mighty empires that had ruled unchecked for centuries. But with every victory came heavier danger. The Council could no longer deny the truth. They could no longer pretend that humans were weak. They gathered fleets, sharpened strategies, and whispered of war, for they understood that if humanity was allowed to grow even a little more, no power in the galaxy would be able to stop them. Yet the humans did not tremble. Kale told his people that war was coming, and they must be ready. He told them that every child must learn, every hand must work, every heart must burn with courage, for the storm ahead would be great, but so too would be the fire of Earth. He said, "We have risen from ashes once, and we will do so again and again until the stars themselves fall silent." So the humans trained, they built, they rose higher and higher, not with wealth, not with numbers, but with spirit, with unbreakable will, with the kind of strength that grows only in those who have been broken and yet still stand. And the galaxy watched in awe and terror, for they had erased humanity from their books. But now they saw the truth written not in words, but in fire. Thus the humans proved them wrong, not with speeches, not with promises, but with action, with battle, with victory. They showed the galaxy that extinction was a lie, that silence was a cage they had broken, and the rulers trembled as the oppressed whispered hope, for once again the forgotten race had returned, and their story was not over. The galaxy did not sleep after the battle that proved humanity had returned, for whispers turned to shouts, and shouts to storms, and every ruler felt the shadow of Earth stretching once more across the stars. Where silence had once been, there was now a sound, the sound of a people who refused to vanish, the sound of voices that would not be erased again. On Earth, Kale stood before the growing crowd, his face marked by scars, his eyes burning with fire, and he told them that their journey was only beginning, that the battle they had won was nothing compared to what was coming. He said, "The empires will come with fire, and chains they will come with fear and rage, for they know what we are. They know that we are the truth that cannot be destroyed." And his people answered with a roar that shook the ruins of their cities. Ships continued to rise from the surface, each one stronger than the last, as broken machines were reforged and new minds brought life to old designs. Children, once hiding in ruins, now trained with weapons, their small hands steady and sure, as they listened to the stories of old Earth, the stories of a race that had reached for the stars, and now reached once more. Kale watched them and felt both sorrow and pride, for he knew they were born into war, yet he also knew that they carried a strength that no empire could match. Across the galaxy, the oppressed races began to rally. They sent secret words to Earth, words of hope, words of alliance, and some even sent small fleets of ships that slipped past the eyes of the Council to join the humans. Every ally meant more strength. Every whisper of support meant the chains of the old order were cracking. The Council tried to stop this with threats, with fear, with promises of destruction, but the more they threatened, the more the people looked to Earth and saw light where once there had only been darkness. One night, Kale stood alone on the edge of the broken capital of Earth, looking at the stars above, and he wondered what legacy they were building. He wondered if the galaxy would remember them as saviors or destroyers, for he knew that humanity did not walk a path of peace alone. Their fire could warm, but it could also burn, and in his heart he prayed that their return would bring freedom and not ruin. Soon the fleets of the Council began to gather at the edge of human space, thousands of ships, strong, their engines burning like a wall of fire, ready to sweep across Earth and end the rebirth before it could grow. Kale received the news, and the people felt fear whisper through their hearts. But Kale raised his voice and said, "We will not hide, we will not beg, we will stand as our ancestors stood. We will fight not for power, not for conquest, but for the right to exist." And once again the people roared, with fire in their voices. The day of the storm came. The sky of Earth darkened as the fleet of the Council entered orbit, their ships vast and shining like monsters of metal, their weapons glowing with power, ready to burn the world. Below, the leaders of the Council spoke with voices filled with scorn, telling the humans to surrender, telling them to bow once more, to vanish back into the dust of history. But the humans answered not with words, but with action, for their ships rose there, weapons lit, and their hearts burned brighter than the stars. The battle that followed was chaos and fire. The Council unleashed waves of destruction, yet the humans fought with fury, their crude ships weaving between giants, their weapons striking with precision, their voices roaring across the radios with courage. Kale led from the front, his ship scarred, his body weary, yet his spirit unbroken. Every strike he made carried the weight of Earth. Every order he gave was filled with the hope of his people, and slowly, against all odds, the Council began to falter. The galaxy watched in silence for the outcome of this battle would shape their future. Some prayed for the humans to win, others prayed for them to fall. But all eyes were fixed on the fire that burned above Earth. And when the dust began to clear, the truth was seen. Though the humans had lost many, though their ships lay broken in the void, though Kale himself stood wounded at the heart of his ship, still the humans had not fallen. Still they fought, still they endured, and the Council knew they could not erase them again. In that moment, fear turned to despair among the rulers, for they realized that the humans were not simply survivors. They were the storm itself, a force that could not be destroyed, only endured, and the oppressed races saw hope brighter than ever. They rose in rebellion across countless worlds, striking chain from their necks, lifting their voices in freedom, and each of them whispered the same words: Earth has returned, Earth has proved them wrong. Kale stood on the surface of Earth, his body broken, but his eyes alight. And he spoke to his people, telling them that this victory was not the end, but only the beginning. He said, the galaxy will come again with more ships, with more fire. But so will we, for our strength is not in our machines, not in our numbers, but in our will. As long as one human heart beats, the fire will burn. And the people answered with voices like thunder. The Council retreated, but they did not vanish. They planned, they plotted, they whispered of weapons that could end even the humans. They swore that they would not allow the flame to spread, yet deep inside, even they knew the truth: the humans had risen, and nothing could ever erase them again. As the stars burned above Earth, Kale looked to the sky and whispered that humanity had returned, not only to survive, but to lead, to inspire, to fight for a galaxy that had forgotten freedom. And in that whisper was both hope and warning, for the story of humanity was not over, it was only beginning. And the galaxy would never again be the same. For they had erased humanity from history, but history itself had proved them wrong, and now the legacy of Earth was written not in silence, but in fire.